Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a specific yet really significant legal situation unfolding in Thailand.
hmm
This deep dive isn't about, debating guilt or innocence in the original case. It's focused squarely on the legal process concerning the enforcement of a final prison sentence.
That's right. The sentence for a former political office holder, Thaksin Shinawatra.
Exactly.
And our source material for this, well, it's a detailed account, mostly drawing from BBC Thai's reporting. They covered the very first day the Supreme Court's Criminal Division for Holders of Political Positions started its formal inquiry into this.
That was June 13th, 2025.
Yeah, June 13th, that initial hearing.
So our mission here is really precise. We want to unpack the key details, maybe some surprising moments, and understand the core questions the court itself seems to be exploring.
Based strictly on what happened in that first session.
Right. We're looking at the procedural focus, why they're calling certain witnesses, demanding specific documents, that kind of thing.
Essentially, the big question the court appears to be asking is this. Was the enforcement of that final prison sentence carried out correctly? According to the law and regulations.
Especially concerning the time spent outside prison walls.
Precisely. That seems to be the crux of it.
Okay, let's paint a picture of this first hearing. June 13th, 2025. Courtroom 1, Supreme Court, Sanam Luang. The official case number is black number 12568, but everyone really knows it as the Floor 14 case.
Yeah, that's the common name. And the atmosphere that day, definitely busy, lots of people there.
Media, too.
Oh yeah, media, observers. The room was full. They had seating separated out plaintiff, defendant, witnesses, media, public, and media were allowed to observe, which is worth noting.
And who is presiding?
A panel of 5 Supreme Court judges.
Now, something that immediately jumped out at me from the source material was the court's own statement about its authority here.
Yeah.
It kind of sets the stage, doesn't it?
It really does. The court explicitly said it has the power to inquire and issue orders when it looks like the enforcement of a final judgment might not be in line with the committal order.
So this isn't just them responding to a complaint.
No, it implies the court itself sees potential issues, potential discrepancies in how the sentence was carried out. They feel a need to dig into it themselves.
Okay, so they're launching this because something about the enforcement process raised their own questions.
Yeah.
Got it. Who were the official parties in the room?
On the plaintiff side, you had the Attorney General and the National Anti-Corruption Commission, the NACC.
Okay.
And representing the defendant, Thaksin Shinawatra, was his lawyer, Winyat Shartmantrati. Thaksin himself, he wasn't actually in court that day.
Right, and the court's focus is super narrow, isn't it? They're not reopening the original conviction or anything like that?
Not at all. This inquiry is specifically about enforcing the prison sentence after conviction, particularly that period from August 2023 to February 2024.
His transfer in time at the police hospital, the 14th floor.
Exactly. The core legal question, it seems, is whether that time truly counted as imprisonment under the law.
Or was it something else, like maybe a form of house arrest?
Potentially.
Oh.
And crucially, were the procedures followed actually lawful? That's what they're digging into.
So first day, first witness, who did they call?
First up was Manop Chomchon. He's the current commander of Bangkok Special Prison.
Current commander.
Yeah, and that's important. He came in with some other officers, but the court asked most of them to leave, just kept one aide with him.
And you said current commander. There was a key detail about his timing, wasn't there?
Yes, absolutely critical. He stated under oath he only took office on November 20th, 2024.
So after the main period being looked at.
Exactly, after the August 2023 to February 2024 timeframe. So he wasn't the commander during the initial transfer or most of the stay at the hospital.
He's testifying based on records then, not firsthand experience of those events.
Pretty much. Based on the records and his current knowledge of procedures, not personal involvement back then.
Okay. He was sworn in, testified for about 40 minutes.
Yeah, about that. Mostly answering questions from 3 of the 5 judges.
Let's get into those questions because they really show what the court's trying to pin down. First thing, foreign medical history.
Right out of the gate, they asked if the prison currently has Thaksin's foreign medical history documents.
And the answer.
A direct no. The commander said the prison does not have them now.
How did the court react?
They immediately ordered the prison. Go check if these documents exist anywhere, find them, submit them within 15 days. Or, if you really can't find them, report back formally.
So that's document number 1 the court clearly wants to see. Seems significant.
Definitely signals they think it's relevant to understanding the initial medical picture.
Okay, then the judges drill down into the very start of all this. The assessment and transfer on the night of August 22nd, 2023.
Yep. Who assessed him when he arrived at prison. The commander, looking at the records, said it was Dr. Rumthip Sufanat from the correctional hospital.
And what symptoms are logged?
High blood pressure, low blood oxygen, insomnia, chest tightness. Standard stuff for classifying him in the high-risk group 608.
What was the doctor's recommendation based on that assessment?
The documentation recommended transfer for continued treatment at a higher capacity hospital, but during normal hours.
During the day.
Right. Though it also mentioned the possibility of an external transfer in an emergency.
Okay, and this leads to something that sounded a bit unusual in the report, this pre-written transfer form.
Yeah, the court zeroed in on that. They asked specifically, was the form authorizing an external transfer in an emergency filled out in advance?
And was it?
The commander confirmed, yes, it was written in advance, just in case of potential emergencies.
So the court then asked if that's normal procedure, writing these things out beforehand.
They did. And the commander, well, he kind of sidestepped a direct yes or no on standard procedure. He said it was the doctor's practice, not really his area, and again, he wasn't commander then. He did add, though, that currently at Bangkok Special Prison, they don't have reports of other inmates having these advance emergency transfer forms written up.
Interesting contrast.
Yeah, though he added duty officers might handle things like that at their level sometimes.
Yeah.
Still, makes you wonder.
It does. Was this a one-off or just uncommon? And this ties right into the next big point the court hammered on, why he went straight to the police hospital.
Exactly. Bypassing the correctional hospital completely that night.
Which is the standard first stop, right?
Usually, yes. So the court asked, point blank, why skip the correctional hospital on August 22nd night?
What was the explanation from the documents?
The commander said, based on the records from that night, the symptoms, high blood pressure, low oxygen, led to the decision to send him externally at night to, quote, save the patient's life.
An emergency justification.
Right. But the court pushed further. They questioned how that diagnosis, the one justifying the emergency night transfer, was actually made.
Given the time of night.
Precisely. They asked how the diagnosis happened if there wasn't a doctor physically in the prison infirmary then.
And the yes, sir.
The commander explained the nurse at the prison called and consulted a doctor at the correctional hospital by phone.
Okay. So a phone consultation between the nurse inside and a doctor outside.
That's the explanation given.
And that phone call led to the decision for an immediate external transfer, skipping the correctional hospital visit.
That's what the commander confirmed. The court asked directly, so he didn't go to the correctional hospital first that night. And he said yes, meaning correct, he didn't.
Wow. And did the court link this back to the pre-written form?
They did. They asked if the symptoms described that night actually matched what was on that pre-written emergency form.
Could the commander answer that?
He said he didn't know. He wasn't there. Didn't see the specific form used that night.
Yeah.
Remember, he took office much later.
Right. This whole line of questioning, it really picks apart the sequence and the justification for every step that night.
Absolutely. They also wanted to understand the legal basis the prison was using for these external transfers.
Okay, what laws came up?
They specifically asked the commander about his understanding of the legal authority, citing Section 55 of the Corrections Act, that's the general law on inmate transfers and treatment, and also a specific ministerial regulation from BE 2563.
That regulation provides more detail on medical transfers.
Exactly. The commander stated the transfer relied on that ministerial regulation.
But then there was a catch about his understanding of it.
Yeah, this was interesting. The commander admitted he doesn't actually know the precise legal meaning of specific disease, as it's used in that very regulation he cited.
He doesn't know what it means?
He speculated, like maybe mental illness or cancer, but he wasn't sure. Since it ultimately depends on the doctor's judgment, the fact the court is probing his understanding of a key term in the regulation used to justify the transfer, well, it's telling.
Definitely. Did he move on from the initial transfer?
Yes. They shifted focus to his time at the police hospital, specifically the guards assigned to him there.
What details came out about the guards?
The commander said there were 4 guards total, working in 2 shifts, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., then 4:40 p.m. overnight to 8:30 a.m. the next day.
And this was documented?
He said yes, in daily logbooks and also through overtime pay requests submitted by the guards.
Ah, the overtime pay. And did the court want proof of that?
We did. That's the next specific document they ordered.
Right.
Submit the guard's overtime pay documents within 15 days.
Another seemingly small detail, but clearly one the court thinks is important. Why ask for pay slips?
Maybe to verify who was actually there when, the level of staffing. It provides concrete evidence of the personnel involved in the control aspect.
Okay. Anything else regarding his stay at the hospital?
One more point. The court brought up the general correctional regulation that says inmates shouldn't usually be kept in special, separate rooms.
Kind of like isolation.
Sort of. The commander acknowledged the rule, but mentioned there are very rare exceptions. Things like TB, serious contagious diseases, maybe severe mental illness.
Implying that Thackson's documented conditions, high blood pressure, low oxygen, wouldn't typically qualify for those specific exceptions.
That seemed to be the implicit question raised by bringing up the rule and its narrow exceptions.
Okay, so that wraps up the commander's testimonial. Then Thackson's lawyer got a chance.
Yes, Wynyard Chartrandtree. He was present and requested to ask questions. He apparently had about 10 prepared.
But the court didn't allow all of them.
No, they limited him to just 4.
Why are the others disallowed? What was the court's reasoning?
They said some questions either contradicted the court's own line of inquiry, basically, questioning the court's process, or the information was already covered in documents that had been submitted.
Can you give an example of one that got shut down?
One notable example was when he tried to ask if other inmates had ever been transferred outside prison without first going through the correctional hospital.
Trying to establish a precedent, maybe?
Perhaps. But the court apparently saw that as questioning the validity of their inquiry into this specific case. They basically said, we'll make the final determination on procedural correctness here.
Gotcha. Did the lawyer do anything else?
He submitted his own list of witnesses he'd like the court to call, and he made a request about scheduling.
What was that?
He asked the court to try and avoid scheduling future hearings on dates when Thackson has to be in court for his separate Section 112 case.
And the court's response?
Pretty fun. They said scheduling depends entirely on the availability of the 5 judges in the courtrooms. The defendant, managing his appearances in other cases, is his own responsibility.
Okay, so this first session was really just setting the stage, calling the first witness. What's next? More hearings.
Oh, yeah. The court announced 6 more hearing dates spread throughout July 2025. July 4th, 8th, 15th, 25th, and 30th.
Busy month.
And they expect to hear from roughly 20 more witnesses in total.
20? Wow. Do we know who some of these key future witnesses might be?
We do. The schedule outlines some key groups. On July 4th, they expect a group of the doctors and nurses involved.
Including Dr. Rumthip, the one who did the initial assessment.
Yes. Notably, Dr. Rumthip Sufanant is on that list. And it's worth remembering, she's the one who recently faced disciplinary action from the medical council related to this case.
That'll be interesting testimony. What about July 8th?
That day is scheduled for the duty prison officers, the ones actually on shift that night, August 22nd. Someone named Sanya Wangingkong was mentioned as an example.
So the ground level staff and July 15th.
That looks like higher level officials from the corrections department. The current director general, Sahakarn Petran, is scheduled, and also former commanders of Bangkok Special Prison who were in charge during the relevant period, names like Nathi Thongplod and Pramod Thongsi.
Okay, so they're really covering all the bases, the medical side, the prison guards on duty, and the administrative leadership then and now.
Seems like it. A very thorough approach.
And besides the witnesses, were any other documents ordered besides the overtime slips in the foreign medical history?
Yes. The court also ordered the submission of 2 more reports. First, the NACC's report on the National Human Rights Commission's investigation into the whole Fluor-14 situation.
Okay.
And second, the actual resolution from the Medical Council dated June 12, 2025, which detailed the disciplinary action taken against the doctors involved.
So pulling in findings from other bodies that have looked into aspects of this?
Exactly. They want all the related official paperwork, it seems.
Now, after the hearing ended, Thackson's lawyer spoke to the press. What was his take?
Yeah, he gave some comments. He reportedly said he felt the court process was becoming clearer now.
Clearer how?
He felt it was genuinely focused on finding the facts, not swayed by, public opinion or pressure.
Okay.
And he stuck to his argument regarding the medical council's action against the doctors. He maintained that's about the severity of the illness, which he sees as separate from what this court is looking at.
Which is the legality of the process used for the transfer and hospital stay.
Precisely. He emphasized that the law governing transfers doesn't actually use the word critical
What?
or so for him, the disciplinary action on severity doesn't automatically mean the transfer process itself was illegal.
An interesting distinction he's drawing.
And he also reiterated his position that Faxon, as a convicted inmate, met the necessary criteria later on to be considered for parole or release.
Right, suggesting his status and condition were within the bounds for that process, too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and pull this all together from this first session. What really stands out to you? What's the big takeaway here?
I think the clearest thing, for me anyway, is just how incredibly detailed and almost granular this examination is.
Yeah.
The court, at least right now, doesn't seem primarily focused on whether Faxon was really sick enough to need the hospital. That might come later, maybe. But the intense focus now is on the nuts and bolts.
The procedures, the paperwork, the legal justifications cited at each step.
Exactly. Scrutinizing the process of transferring him out and managing his time outside the prison walls.
All those questions to the prison commander really highlight that, don't they? Bypassing the correctional hospital, the pre-written form, the phone diagnosis at night.
The request for overtime slips, the missing foreign medical history.
It all points to the court meticulously building a timeline and checking if every single step followed the established rules and laws for handling inmates.
Yeah, they're basically auditing the enforcement process. It's a legal process, evaluating another legal process. And they seem determined to understand every little detail.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on after this deep dive. Think about those specific documents the court demanded.
Especially the ones the commander said the prison doesn't have right now, like the guard overtime pay slips and the foreign medical history.
What might those particular records actually reveal if or when they surface?
Yeah, what specific details could be hiding in seemingly mundane administrative records like pay slips or in medical records from abroad?
Could they tell us more about the real level of control exerted at the hospital, the actual oversight?
Could they maybe reveal aspects of what was happening on floor 14 that haven't really come out yet? It's fascinating to think what concrete information the court hopes to find in these specific pieces of paper they're chasing down.
What picture might they complete about that time spent outside the prison walls?
Exactly.
Definitely something to keep in mind as this inquiry unfolds. We'll certainly be keeping a close eye on it as more witnesses testify, and hopefully some of these documents get submitted in the coming weeks.
Indeed. It's far from over.